Lead generation for local businesses is no joke. Anyone who's tried this know how difficult it can actually get. So in this video, I'll be demonstrating how we can scrape local businesses and at the same time actually enrich them by using one single tool. Then obviously you can use these scrape businesses for anything you would like. Most people use them for ads, retargeting, or doing cold calling. In this video, I'll also be showing you how you can use these scrape businesses to send cold emails to, and also at the same time be able to get 7, 8, 9% reply rate. With that being said, let's get straight into it. So this is a very straightforward workflow, right? As you can see, it's not that complicated, and all we need is actually two tools, right? The clay is kind of optional, but Outscraper and Plus5, that's the tools we're going to use, right? And by the way, this workflow here, I'm actually using it for any of my clients that are local businesses. And also at the same time, I'm using it also for my own agency. My agency is called localplus.co or localplus.ai. You can check it out. So all my leads, all my sales is actually through this workflow, right? And every time I get a client from that needs help with lead generation, cold emailing from local businesses, this is the workflow I'm using, right? Let's get straight to it. The first part is Outscraper. We're going to use Outscraper to scrape the leads, but the Outscraper is now capable of also verifying the leads and do simple enrichments as well, right? Now, after we've scraped the leads, then we're going to put it into Clay. You don't have to use Clay. You can actually just use Google Sheets and then vibe code a little bit by yourself, right? I'm going to use Clay. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. Inside Clay, we're actually going to do some HTTP requests. I know it sounds complicated, but it's not, all right? Basically, we're going to call Outscraper again to enrich other data from the current data that we have. I'm going to show you in a sec. Then we're also going to use OpenAI API to clean some data because we do actually want like maybe the owner's first name and, you know, some other useful tools for it, right? And then after everything is enriched, then you can use the Plus5 for the sending tool. So let's get straight to it. So first things first, you're going to go into Outscraper, log into your account. If you don't have one, you can register. You can register using my link. You'll get some extra credits the first time you make a payment, and I'll also get some benefits off it as well. If not, you can just register. I don't mind. So once you've logged in, you go into the Outscraper platform and press on services, and then you press on open service on the Google Maps scraper. Now, one thing to understand is the pricing system of Outscraper, because the first 500 queries you make, they're actually free, and after that you're going to stop paying, and the more you actually scrape, the cheaper it's going to become. But my suggestion is, because if you're not that technically inclined and you don't have the time to understand it, just use, you know, ChatGPT, Claude, paste out in Outscraper and understand the pricing, and they're going to tell you in details, like very systematically, that this is how the pricing tiers work, right? So once you're in here, I'm just going to demonstrate an example, okay? So we're going to go for a dentist, and then where we're going to search, let's just say the United States, we're going to pick, let's just say Lacey, okay? It's a town in Washington. There we go. And then let's actually pick one more category, and it's going to be cosmetic dentist and cosmetic surgeon as well, all right? Somewhat in the same industry. So let's just say the maximum result, in this case, I'm just going to pick 250 because I'm just going to demonstrate an example, but you can actually get unlimited and you can get up to like 100 or 200,000, which is awesome about this. Another good thing about Outscraper is that it's scraping live. It's not like a pre-scraped data. What do I mean by this? Because this is very important to understand. Pre-scraped data means that it's basically like a database where you're just pulling out information. Obviously, you're going to get it very quick, but you will actually realize quite many of its data, the phone number and their email, might be actually outdated. So Outscraper is actually a live scrape. So it's actually programmed to go in single-handedly and actually pick them out and verify them for you, right? So scrolling a little bit down, this is the best part, right? So you have this lead gen packs and you have all services. I personally love this part here called there we go. So going down here, you can either pick lead gen packs or all services, right? What I like to do also to save some cost, you can actually go into all services and then pick the lead and contacts enrichment. And then I turn this one off here because I'm not going to use this for this example here. And then we're actually going to have the email address verifier. Again, you can use a separate verifier, but you know, I like to keep things tidy and I just want to like stick to one tool, right? So inside in here, this is the cool part. You can actually prefer like what kind of people do you actually want to get in contact with. I'd like to get in contact with the decision makers, obviously, right? You can also pick like what kind of email type you would like. Do you want the general emails, you know, or the not general? So you actually get personal emails. in this case, since this is just an example, I'm just going to pick any type of email. Contacts per one company, I would actually be fine with 2. Emails per one contact, obviously 1. This is the best part. Ignore without emails and delete email duplicates so you're not actually going to pay for them. There we go. Now, going into the email verifier, remember to pick this on. Scrolling down below, because this is all we need for this example, I love to actually have the advanced parameters on. So that means I would only want to have results with a website, and they have to be operational. And also, I would actually like for them to have a phone number. This is the only things I actually need. Again, you can, if you do require that they are verified or have bad or good rating, you can do that. There are multiple things you can actually do, like when it comes to cold email, when it comes to good and bad rating. Get into that a little bit in another video. So then let these things be. Delete duplicates, use zip codes, it's fine. And then, let's press on that again. I like to have my as a CSV, and then task title, just give it something called, dentist in US. Column to return, right? So by default, it's going to return everything, which is fine. But in my case, I do actually feel that it's a little bit overwhelming with all the information that I'm getting. So in my case, I'm going to have the name, name for emails. There we go. And then I'm going to have the type. The type is almost the same thing as category. I just like to use the type a little bit more. Phone number. We're going to obviously have their website. We're going to have their city, their county. It can be useful in some cases, but, I'm just going to pick their state instead. Their country code, I like to have that. And then we're going to be using area of service. They already have rating and reviews. I like that. Reviews things is also good. And then scrolling a little bit down, you remember, for your use case, you have to pick whatever suits your need. Right now, we're just gonna try and get some lead generation for these dentists. All right, so this is the things that I would need in this case, right? Now let's scroll down a little bit. Okay, we have everything we need. I think the pricing. There we go. Got it. Location link. Location link is actually very important. The CID. You can use it. I'd actually recommend you to either have the place ID or CID, because the place ID or CID is actually used for more further enrichments, all right? So in this case, I'm just going to go with the place ID. I'm going to scroll down here. And then we have further things here in the enrichment. You can have their first name. I'd like to have that. You can have their personal email address, and you can also have all the contact phone number of this person. And then, you know what? We're going to just get the data and confirm. So it's going to run like the estimates on how much it's going to cost. So for this particular task, it's going to cost me around almost nothing, and it's going to take between 14 to 50 minutes. It's actually usually a lot lower than that. So I'll get back to this once I've started to run this, all right? So I did actually notice one thing. If you can see here, you can see there's only 4 dentists in Lacey. Obviously, we're going to change this because that's a small area, right? So we're actually going to let's just pick New York. Then we definitely have some more. There we go. And then get data. You have to be cautious about these things, because then suddenly you'd be surprised that you only get like a few queries. So we have more than 435 queries. There we go. Let's go and press confirm. So this is going to take some time. Until then, I'm going to pause the video, and then we're going to continue after. Let's go. So as you can see, these 10 has been run. So there we go. So it has been finished. Once you navigate to tasks, you'll see it's done. This cost me around about $1. But as you can see, I'm using this for multiple of my, for my agency, and it can come up and cost like 100 and 200. It depends on your volume, obviously, right? This took me about 4 or 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes less time, but it all depends on your volume and what kind of enrichment tools you're actually compiled together, right? So download this, and then we'll go over to Clay. Create an account inside Clay, and then the first thing you're going to do is press new here, and then the workbook. Once you have the workbook up running, let's just call it US Dentist. Then we're going to press add here, and then just a simple blank table. And now we're going to import what we just downloaded from Outscraper. Let's go ahead and do that. So I went ahead and added the CSV from Outscraper, and with these options here, then you just press continue, and now we're going to map them out. We're going to map them out into our table. Some of these things are, everything here is relevant except for one thing, which is the name. And I'm going to explain this. One of the good things about Outscraper is the fact that name for emails Outscraper went in. Have you ever noticed, like, when you search for companies, they have these suffixes in the at the end, depending on like what kind of entity it is. It has like the Inc. It has sometimes APS, LLC, and LCC, whatever it is, right? So Outscraper went ahead and removed those for us, because once we send a cold email, we don't want to mention those parts, because then they can actually obviously see that it's a cold email. So we're just going to add all these things in. Contact phones is actually not that relevant in this case, okay? Reviews, links, and place ID. There we go. So save, and it doesn't matter if you run or you don't run. There's no enrichments here. So, and then I like to keep things a little bit tidy. So I'm gonna just see these through. I'm gonna remove this column. Obviously, it has nothing, and then I'm gonna obviously remove this row here. It has nothing. Let's just check. Okay, as you can see, we have duplicate content here. And the reason for that is because I went inside Outscraper and added 2 contact person per company. Now, the reason why that is very useful is because if it's a very high ticket, then you want to make sure that your emails actually get through. But in this case, just to simplify the example, I'm just going to remove the duplicates, okay? So this is not a bug. This is actually deliberate. So dedupe, and then we're actually going to select all here, and then we would have 200. There we go. So we just removed the 250 duplicates, right? Again, very important. If you are using high ticket, then I would actually suggest you keep the duplicates and then, send emails to both these companies, to these email addresses, because sometimes they would respond in the other one. I like to have the email here. Now, we have the email, we have the name for email. So we're just actually going to call this company name now. And now, so what we would like to do is we would actually like to have the something we can use as a hook. And in this case, we're actually going to enrich the current data we have with another Outscraper call. So instead of going into Outscraper, we can actually use Clay. And again, you don't have to use Clay. You can actually use Google Sheets and actually vibe code a little bit, but we'll make an HTTP request directly to Outscraper. Let me demonstrate. So the way it works is that if you really want to get thorough about it, then you have to go into Outscraper and get the documentation with their API. And remember, obviously, to make an API key, you can do that inside Outscraper as well. So inside task and just API integrations, and then API key, and then just create one and copy it, right? Now, the way it's going to happen is that I'm going to create a new enrichment and like HTTP and add it in. Go to the configure, and now in the method, in the endpoint, we're going to have, by the way, I have another screen here where I have some of the information, so I don't have to like go back and forth and confuse everyone. So the method is going to be a GET request, and then we're going to use this endpoint here. So as you can see, it's called reviews version 3. It's essentially pulling out information for each of these rows, the review information. Now, there's multiple ways we can do this, but I like to keep things simple and go into the query parameters and then add a new key and the value as well here, okay? So the first one is going to be, we're going to sort by the highest. So let me just see the sort by the highest rating, okay? So this, you can also write lowest rating here, right? What this essentially means is that we're actually, imagine that each of these rows has all these reviews, but now we're filtering by the highest review, right? Highest rating, sorry about that. So the next one is going to be async false. It just debugs a lot of things. If you have it to true, sometimes it's going to take some longer time, and sometimes it's going to come with some errors. This usually just works a lot better for myself. Then query is going to be, this is basically, what are we actually, what kind of record are we actually using to get this information? And there is a unique identifier for this. You can use, there are multiple, but the best one to use is the CID or place ID when it comes to Google Business Profiles. So in this case, the query is the place ID. So remember back then in Outscraper, we scraped the place ID. You should be having it here. So that's the one we're going to use. So let me add the next one. The next one I'm using is, let me just get here. Yeah, right. So source, right? Where are we getting this information from? It's going to be Google. It's not Trustpilot. It's not Yelp. And then we're also going to have, check, ignore empty, and then true. We're going to have that true. And then we're only looking for positive reviews. So cutoff rating should be 5, right? So, and the languages should be obviously, English. So ENG. So these things, you can actually find it inside API documentation. You don't have to use these specific query parameters that I used. You can actually change it a lot. And by changing it, you can actually customize a lot of things, all right? So inside the header, you're actually going to use your API key. So in my case, it's going to be, you have to write like the API key. And obviously, I'm not going to copy paste my API key in front of you guys. So I'm just going to copy it here, and then I'll save it now. And then that's basically it. All right. There we go. Paste my API key. And now we're going to save and run for 10 rows. All right. What we should be seeing is a request 200, meaning that it actually ended in a result. All right. It's going to take some time. We're just going to rename this positive review. All right, there we go. We got some information here. So what kind of information do we actually get from this? If we write on data, then you can see, okay, we've obviously gotten all these information, but additionally, we have this reviews data file here, right? So it's going to basically cache these reviews that we can actually use. But there's definitely something going on here because we don't want the review data for all of these. We could just use like a few. Just one or two, 5-star reviews, because we're going to use that to actually do some enrichments with, right? So something is up there because we're going to use more money, but we don't want to use all our credits off that. So we have to add something in the query parameter. And in this case, it's going to be reviews limit. Yeah, I have the API documentation here, so that's good. All right, there we go. So let's try and run these 10 rows again. So it's going to be a lot more simple now. This is going to save you a lot of call. There we go. So, perfect. Going down here, I'm just going to make sure, double check all the time. There we go, reviews data. Yeah, we have one now. This is perfect. So, what will happen in here is that we have their author information and also what the review was actually about. So, this is very cool. You can see that the owner answer, this is the answer, and this is what they wrote, right? We're going to use that as a hook. Now, what you guys can do, this is optional, right? If you want to further enrich the data that we already have, we can also look for a competitor. The way we would do that is actually almost exactly the same method. So we're going to do an HTTP request again, and then we're going to go into configure, again, map out the same things. But instead of actually, having the endpoint with the reviews, we could change that. So we could change that to the search version 3. And now in here, in the query parameters, we can actually add some, the search, what should the search be? So we could have, let me just find the API here. The query could be something like best type. So in this case, it's going to be best dentist in city, right? Now, then we could, in practice, we could actually run this and actually get the competitors and use that as well in the cold email because it's going to be very precise. And you can actually program it so it's not actually going to come with the company name that we already have. So because it would be a little bit awkward to have the same company name. So I'm going to remove this for now, but it's just to demonstrate to you how powerful Outscraper is. And you can actually do so many cool enrichments with it, combining it with Clay or some vibe coding. All right. Go back here. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a prompt that's going to use this information as a hook, okay? So I'm going to start by writing AI, use AI here, and then into configure. And, instead of using the web research, I'm going to use create or modify content because the web research, we don't need access to search engines for this one, right? So create and modify content. I like to use the ChatGPT 5.6 Luna, very cheap, and I'm using my own API key. If you don't know how to use your own API key, you go back to Clay and add your own API key. I wouldn't recommend using Clay's because the credits are, they're quite expensive. Now in here, you're actually going to build your prompt, all right? So the way you mention things from Clay is that you can directly write like, hey, we're a reputation management agency, and we have extracted information about this company. And then once you write slash and just write company name, you were actually using these company names as inside your prompt for each record. Now we can also be like, okay, so this is the author name. You see, if you just write author, it's actually going to pull it out for you. So it's going to find these things for you that, whereas this author actually mentioned, there we go, author title. So we know this is who the author is. And then this is the review name. Or review text that the author wrote. review. And then you're gonna look through it again and find it. So I'm gonna play around with the prompts a little bit, and then I'm gonna get back to you with the final prompt that I have, and you can essentially just copy paste it, right? So let me just be back here. So this is going to be the final prompt that I came forward to, right? So I'm basically writing an opening line of of cold email reputation management service, blah. And basically I'm giving it the inputs, and I'm defining some rules that hey, we're going to use the author's first name. We're going to use, we're also going to not like quote directly word by word and all these kind of rules, right? So if I run this by, these 10, then I have essentially my first hook. This is quite cool. So you see it's writing, was looking through your reviews and saw Madeline mentioned that Kelly's cleaning was so gentle she left no discomfort while still being thorough enough to offer advice for her. Now, for the sending tool, I obviously love Plus5. Everything about them is perfect for me, but it's up to you what you would want to use. I recommend Plus5. If you need help with setting up, let me know. Anyways, you're going to go to the email accounts and then start adding the new email accounts if you're going to do it yourself. You might have someone to do it. You might have an agency. You might have myself to do it. It's up to you. Add them in, start the warm-up tool, and then it's going to take some time. It's going to take 2 to 3 weeks, right? Then once that's done, go into the campaigns, and then you'll have to add a new campaign. As you can see, I've already added that, but you know what? Let me actually just delete that and then start over again. So add new campaign, go in here and call it US Dentists. There we go. And then edit campaign, you will upload the lead. There we go. So now you're going to map them out, right? One of the good things about the Plus5 is that you can actually just add as a custom variable once they are not actually mapped out here. So these are quite important information, because if you start dialing or you start emailing back and forth, you always have these information about them then, all right? So we're going to have the rating, we're going to have the reviews, and then we're going to go and have the location link. Place ID, we don't really need that. We've already used that. Positive review request, we don't need this one. The reason is because this is the call into Outscraper. We don't need that. But this one here, review-based cold hook, this is very relevant. We're going to use that. Skip leads that exist in our campaigns. I don't want to do that in this case, so just import. There we go. So we have 249, so one of them was invalid, which is fine. We're going to go into sequences, and now we're going to start to sequence things, right? So as a subject, I'm just going to say directly like, the review from, and then the author name, the person that it was from. I'm obviously not going to go too much into depth with how to write a good and compelling copy. So I'll just show you. So inside the sequences, I'm not going to go too much in depth with the tricks and methods you can use here, but the subject line, if I were to actually go and do this, I would definitely use the author name, right? So if you had the author name as a variable, which you could actually have in Clay, so going back here, right, you can actually extract the author name here, author title, right? So we can just add that as a column and then export that and put that again into Plus5. In this case, I didn't use that because, I didn't actually think about it until now. So it's just to tell you that this is actually something you can do. So then I would just add it in and just be like author name, call it that. The review from author name, something like that. And then that's actually going to intrigue some interest, because they'd be like, oh, wow, okay, this is actually someone I remember. This is actually a prior client of mine, right? A patient of mine. So here I'm going to write hi. Usually I do like to do some spin taxing here. Not going to go too much in depth with how to spin tax, but I do recommend to do it. So hi, and then once we can use the variables that we've gotten, this review-based cold hook. So if I just preview this, right, you'd be able to see that it says something like, hey, was looking through your review. So it's basically picking out that specific record we have in here inside our claim. So this record here from the review-based cold hook that we use ChatGPT for, it's actually going to get in here. And now we're going to have the body. The body could be something like, we recently helped, the more authoritative you are, the better. We recently helped this company, and then you can have your case studies, or you can also mention something like, one of the most important things for AI searches or actually getting new clients is getting consistent reviews. So in this case, since this is a reputation management software, I'd be like, we've built a system that automates review requests, and this will significantly, yeah, I've spelled wrong, but it's okay. Significantly boost your impressions and, well, your amount of calls. Let's just say something like that, right? And then best regards. Then you can use the first name and last name of the author that's actually written this, so the email account, right? And then you just save this. You can add multiple steps if you want to, and then you are actually good to go from there. And then you schedule it and pick the email addresses that you want to use and how many emails you would want to send a day. The lower actually, the better usually, because then you don't actually land into spam. You have your settings, and then you have a Unibox here, and then you see all your responses coming in. So yeah, that was basically it about this tutorial.